Hello and welcome to Pride Action TV. My name is Kim Hunt and I'm the Executive Director of Pride Action Tank, or PAT as we like to call it. It is a project of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, and Pride Action Tank is a project incubator and think tank focused on action that leads to opportunities and improvements in outcomes for LGBTQ people. Our interest areas are aging, health, safety, housing, financial security, and youth. And we do the show the first Friday of every month, so we're happy to have you join us. I want to remind folks that this is a call-in show, and the number is 312-738-1060, and we hope that you will be a part of the conversation. So today we are going to talk about aging in the LGBTQ community, and that's A-G-I-N-G, or growing older, which if we're lucky, we're all doing. And my guest today is a dear friend and I will say a longtime activist, Don Bell. Don is just someone who's been a part of my life, but also a part of the lives of the organizations that I've been lucky to be affiliated with. You were there from the very beginning with one of the organizations I worked with, Affinity Community Services. And Don is an older adult who identifies as gay and African American and a dad and many other identities. And Don is a part of Pride Action Tank's planning committee on LGBTQ aging called Out-Aging Summit on Our Possibilities, which is happening May 23rd and through 25th. The 23rd is an opening reception at Affinity Community Services on the South Side. And on the 24th, we are having a day just for LGBTQ older adults, which will take place at AARP in a downtown location, their downtown office. And the second full day, May 25th, is a day for service providers, clinicians, researchers, advocates on LGBTQ older adult issues, and also any older adults who would like to return. And that day is also at AARP, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. Don, I've often heard you just kind of lay the groundwork for people about how important it is to begin to address, or not even to begin, but to have already started addressing the needs of LGBTQ older adults, specifically this population of older adults, because of the milestones in history that have been unparalleled in American history, at least. So could you open up by talking about that a bit?
Well, oftentimes on public commentary shows, when people are talking about social justice issues related to the LGBT community, they speak of the tremendous advances that have been made in the last 50 years. And what makes my generation unique is the fact that we, in fact, were alive for the last 50 years. So we experienced all of those advances personally. Everything from the demonstrations at Stonewall Inn, which were considered the beginning of the LGBTQ civil rights movement, up through marriage equality and all of the issues that we're dealing with now in the current political administration. So we have lived those experiences, and from our lived experience, we want to pass along a legacy to younger members of our community.
And you've also talked about this generation, I shouldn't say this is multiple generations, but living the AIDS epidemic being one big issue,
right,
and also just moving through that space where sexual orientation, particularly for gay and lesbian folks, was deemed a mental health disorder, right, through this process in society overall of more and more people coming out, and now being that generation that has kind of gone through that transition and is now at this place where they are kind of encountering some of the same systems that in many cases rejected them when they were younger.
Well, for our generation, what happened was we did live through tremendously catastrophic situations, like the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which was the most significant occurrence to the LGBT community after the Holocaust, the Second World War, where 1 million homosexuals were killed, and we have witnessed death, and we've witnessed stigma, and we've witnessed rejection. But also out of that came a lot of the strength of the community. We bonded together. We built institutions to address our own issues, and those institutions now stand as proud members of not only of our community, but of the Chicago community and the national community. So again, we've seen those things, we've lived this heritage, and now we are moving into a new experience. And that experience is being the first out generation of elder LGBT people. And that is significant.
And we know that there are some difficulties that have come with that, right? Not just in the younger years for older adults now, but also now just in terms of, we hear stories not too infrequently about folks who are, because they are unable to age in place for one reason or another, may be moving into more mainstream senior care facilities, and in some cases are, if not experiencing just the lack of cultural competence of the staff, are experiencing harassment by their fellow residents, as well as just this feeling like they have to go back into the closet.
Absolutely. Well, I would say that there are three main threats to our community, to our aging community. The first is one that we share with all aging communities, and that is the issue of social isolation. Of course, human beings, and we are human beings to those who doubt it, have a need for social interaction.
Yeah.
And without social interaction, we literally die. So just as babies die from what we call failure to thrive, older people die from being left by themselves without communication, without interaction, without touch, without any connection to the broader society. And that happens to gay people too. The second issue that we encounter is one that is surprising and a little disappointing. Now, I have lived an experience of intersection in life where being a part of a minority community defined by my racial identity and a minority community defined by my sexual orientation and gender identity has been a significant task to live through. And now I've grown into a new ism, and that's ageism. And that's a hard thing to handle. And some of them, like me, resent it, but other people are much more rational, and they just realize that we have to deal with it. But it's serious, and ageism does diminish our community. It diminishes our potential, and it diminishes what we can contribute to the larger community. So it's a significant issue.
When you say it diminishes, do you mean in terms of acceptance of the broader LGBTQ community, or feeling still a part of that community?
Well, it keeps us from doing the things that we can do.
I see.
And as a result of our life experiences and our development, there are lots of things that we can still do. There are things that we have to teach. There's independence that we still have to live. There are contributions to the things that are happening today. Because I was born in 1949 doesn't mean that I continue to live in the mid-20th century. I very actively, like most people, try to live in 2017. And I think most of my contemporaries try to do the same thing. Our society has changed in ways that we could not anticipate. And I don't mean that we could not anticipate 70 years ago. our society has changed in ways that we could not anticipate 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And we in the elder community are affected by that too, so we want to assume our place in that community. But if I can, the final issue that is unique to our community is that despite the advances of the last 40 or 50 years, those of us who've come to a point where we have lived as out gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender people are now being forced to go back into the closet
Right.
in order to attain the services and the support that is generally offered to the aging community. So if we go into a nursing home, even if we go to a medical provider, you know, the issue of our sexual orientation can be a block to receiving the full services of that provider. And so what we have to do is work on, first of all, having this community recognize its needs and what are distinct about its needs, and secondly, calling upon the general community to normalize the LGBT aging experience into the general aging experience so that it does not interfere with your care to identify yourself as gay or lesbian.
I'm glad you said that, because that brings to the point. You know, I do a lot of panel discussions and speak, and I know you do too, before various audiences. And you know, one of the things that when we talk about, let's just use the term cultural competency, people often say, well, I don't really know why that matters, you know, in terms of the LGBTQ community, whether it's aging or youth or whatever it may be. But just to share with our audience some statistics about LGBTQ older adults, there are about 1.5 million LGBTQ people over 55 in the U.S. That number is expected to double in 2030, by 2030, and we know that our systems of care and other social services are not really ready for that. There are about 40,000 LGBTQ folks who are 50 and older in Chicago alone. And when you look at housing, there are about 500 units of housing across the U.S. dedicated to LGBTQ older adults. In Chicago, there are 79 units. You have one of them,
Right.
in Town Hall, near the Center on Halsted. So that's a huge housing mismatch, and not that everyone wants to live in housing that is specifically for LGBTQ older adults, or you know, have that be the focus, but that is an issue for those who do want that. You mentioned social isolation before. LGBTQ older adults are twice as likely to live alone as the general population of older adults, and 3 to 4 times less likely to have children. And we know that in society, children are often the ones who are expected to at least check in on their parents, even if they don't take care of them. But with LGBTQ older adults, particularly those who have had a very difficult time staying connected to their families because families may have rejected them because of their gender identity or social or sexual orientation. And so they don't have those same connections, but many of them may have families of choice. However, those families of choice don't necessarily have the standing within our systems to really take care and help make decisions for that individual.
Right.
Some other things to think about in terms of health disparities is that there's a 12-year life expectancy difference for folks who experience high amounts of stigma, and that is some LGBTQ older adults. There's increased breast cancer, increased rates of obesity, smoking, high blood pressure, and 55% of deaths from AIDS and HIV are among gay or bisexual LGBT older adults. So those are some of the reasons why folks need to care and need to really hone in on cultural competency to make sure that everyone is receiving the health the care and services that they need. Also, it's also important to point out that because of really experiencing a lifetime of discrimination, LGBTQ older adults often have incomes that are much lower than the broader society because, you know, they've, in many parts of the country still, and under this current environment, who knows what will happen, many do not have protections in their states against our sexual orientation and gender identity are not protected classes. So those are some issues that are important. And one thing that I learned a few years ago when there was the LGBTQ needs assessment that was done by the Morton Group in, I think, 2012. And several thousand individuals were surveyed through various forms, and some of the issues that LGBTQ older adults were experiencing were the same issues that LGBTQ youth were experiencing. So the social isolation, the lack of access to quality, affordable, culturally competent health care, the need to understand what benefits are available to them, and also the need to be to have some other sources of income that are essentially cut off because of discrimination. So that's one of the among the many reasons that Pride Action Tank wanted to have its next summit be on aging in the LGBTQ community. And we are having this summit, as I mentioned, let me see if I can do this right. As I mentioned, we're having the summit on LGBTQ older adults called Out Aging. And Out Aging is happening, that some of our website is prideactiontank.org for those of you who want to check this out. So our summit on aging is happening May 23rd through 25th, and Don is on the planning committee for that. And let's talk about the summit a bit, and the kinds of things that we have been discussing. So for Pride Action Tank, it's always important for us to center the voices of the people who are impacted by the issues that we work on. So that means that when we are very early in the planning stages of any activity, we make sure that we have folks on the table, at the table, not on the table. That's another matter. Folks at the table who are, part of that community. So you've been working with us for the,
Yes, I have.
How long have we been working on this?
Forever.
And now it's happening.
Yes.
And we've talked about a lot. I don't know if you want to share your experiences of being on the committee and some of the things that we've discussed.
I will say this about the summit, about its planning and its conceptualization, is that it has offered an opportunity, and it continues to offer the opportunity for members of the aging community to come together and to reflect on the issues of the community as seen by actual community members, and then to communicate those needs out to others, including those people who are providers of service to the elder community. And that's very important. So it's feedback that is given to the people with whom we work most often.
Yeah.
And in this age when we are facing our concerns being eliminated by government, which we expect to provide service, this is a very serious deal. The current administration's desire to remove research questions about the LGBT aging community is very serious, because a society cannot support and provide for a part of itself for which there is little or no knowledge. And this is the kind of thing that we want to help prevent and we want to fight against. It's important. We need to know how many LGBT elders there are. We need to know what their common experiences and needs are with the general aging community, and we need to know what their unique and specific needs are too. This is what a civilized society does.
Exactly. And you mentioned the attempt to remove that LGBTQ question from a very important survey that is tied to how resources are deployed in the older adult community. SAGE, I'm blanking on what SAGE stands for right now, but it's an advocacy group for LGBTQ older adults. It has an action going on right now where folks can go to their website and actually fill out a card saying that we don't want that question to go away. And this is important because if you aren't counted, you're invisible, right? So if you don't count LGBTQ older adults, you can justify not providing specified services to that population, and we definitely don't want to see that happen. One of the reasons, among the reasons that we're having this summit is to really highlight the needs and issues, as you've pointed out, of LGBTQ older adults. So I'll just read the goals of the summit here. One is to create a platform that centers the voices and experiences of LGBTQ older adults to shed light on the issues they face and gaps in services, resources, and opportunities. Provide a diverse and inclusive forum for redefining aging and care, and develop an agenda for advocacy, resources, and inclusion with and for LGBTQ older adults. So in terms of the format of the summit, as I mentioned before, the first day on May 24th is specifically for LGBTQ older adults. We know that some folks don't feel comfortable being public in terms of their gender identity or sexual orientation at this age, and just want to be in a space where they feel like they can communicate and participate without being in a fishbowl. So we are very mindful of creating that kind of space. There will be speakers there who may not necessarily be part of the that population, but they we've discussed with them what their role is. So just to give people a general overview of what's happening, we are going to have a performance by the Artemis Singers, which is, the Artemis Singers have been around, 20-something years at this point, and lesbian choral group. We're going to have a panel on resilience, health, and aging. And we're going to talk to a doctor from Stroger Hospital as well as from Howard Brown Health. Our next panel will be on resistance, advocacy, and aging, which Don will be moderating. And we have folks from Lambda Legal, Jane Addams Senior Caucus, and the John Marshall School of Law. And in the afternoons, we're going to have facilitated discussions around 3 issue areas. One being health and well-being, the second being personal safety and security, and the third being community and connections. And those are opportunities for folks to highlight any issues they're experiencing in those areas, as well as potential solutions that we can explore. And then on the second day, we are starting with a training on how to be an ally to older adults. And then we'll move into some concurrent panels. One is on queering gerontology. And again, this one is for service providers mainly. One is on older adults as decision makers, and the other one is on staying connected. And at lunch, we are going to have a new report being released by the Movement Advancement Project, some national work that they've done on LGBTQ older adults and trends that they're seeing. And we're going to have a keynote by Barbara Satin, who is a transgender activist who is also part of the National Task Force, National LGBTQ Task Force. And then that afternoon, we'll also have the facilitated discussions with the 3 topic areas that we talked about before. And then we'll end the day with a call to action and also an intergenerational closing event. So it's going to be 2 full and amazing days. We encourage people to register. Let's see if I have this overhead turned right. I do. Okay. So people can register for the summit at bit.ly/outaging. You can also go to Pride Action Tank's website, and that is prideactiontank.org. We've also made it possible for folks to register by phone, so we'll add that information to our website as well so that you'll have the phone number in case you aren't able to register online. So, Don, I can't believe time has flown.
We're done again.
We're done again. Yes, I want to thank you so much for
Absolutely.
joining me today. It was very important that if we talk about aging, that we have someone here who is an advocate for older adults.
Growing old before your very
eyes. So we will be back next month, Pride Month. So until then, try to stay warm, enjoy Memorial Day, and we will see you in June.